What if the hero you'd been building, leveling up, and role-playing for dozens of hours wasn't really a hero at all? What if, instead, they were one of the most feared warlords in the entire galaxy? That's the gut punch moment that hit players in Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic back in 2003, a moment that completely redefined not just the story, but how we thought about our own character. KOTOR starts innocently enough. You're just a nameless Republic soldier waking up in the middle of chaos. Your ship is under attack, you scramble for survival, and before long, you're swept into a classic Star Wars-style adventure. Jedi councils, Sith apprentices, lightsaber duels. It's everything fans wanted. And because this is an RPG, you get to decide who you're becoming: a loyal Jedi, a merciful warrior, or someone teetering on the edge of darkness. For the first half of the game, you feel like you're the blank slate protagonist. You're writing your own story, shaping the destiny of the galaxy through choices and battles. But lurking in the shadows is a name that keeps getting whispered: Darth Revan. Once a Jedi Knight, Revan fell to the dark side, built a massive Sith empire, and nearly brought the Republic to its knees. Supposedly, Revan was killed when his apprentice, Darth Malak, betrayed him. And now it's Malak who's the big bad pulling the strings. So you keep playing, convinced you're just another hero thrown into this galactic mess. But then, the truth hits. In one of the greatest twists in gaming history, you learn that you aren't just some random soldier who rose to greatness. You are Darth Revan, the monster everyone's been talking about, the Sith Lord who almost conquered the galaxy. That's you. The Jedi Council didn't destroy you. They captured you, wiped your memory, and reprogrammed you with the hope that, given a clean slate, you could be turned into their weapon against Malak. Every noble deed, every Jedi teaching, every light side choice you made wasn't entirely your own. It was an experiment. You've been living in the shell of your old life, ignorant of the fact that the face on those wanted posters across the galaxy is yours. When this twist landed back in 2003, it was jaw-dropping. Players didn't just feel betrayed by the Jedi, they felt unsettled by the fact that all of their carefully crafted heroic decisions were suddenly tainted. Were you ever truly making your own choices? Or were you just a pawn in someone else's game? And more importantly, what are you going to do now that you know who you are? That's where KOTOR became more than just a Star Wars story. It became your story. Because the game doesn't force you down one path. You can embrace your past as Darth Revan, reclaim your throne as Dark Lord, and plunge the galaxy into fear once again. Or you can reject it, prove that you're not defined by the person you were, and carve out a new destiny as a redeemed Jedi. It's the ultimate identity crisis. On one hand, the power is intoxicating. You're the most dangerous figure in the galaxy, and everyone knows it. On the other hand, the responsibility is crushing. Because all those worlds burned in Revan's wars, that was you. And the allies who trusted you this whole time, they're suddenly looking at you differently, wondering if the mask they followed is about to slip. What made this twist so legendary wasn't just the shock factor, but how it reframed the entire first half of the game. Every flashback, every cryptic line of dialogue, every moment where characters seemed a little too interested in you. It all clicks in hindsight. It's the kind of reveal that makes you want to replay everything just to see the signs you missed. And in true Star Wars fashion, it taps into one of the saga's biggest themes: redemption. Can a person truly change, or will the past always define them? For Revan, that question isn't hypothetical. It's the choice you're forced to make. But here's the real kicker. In a way, the twist works because it mirrors what it feels like to be a player in an RPG. You think you're free to carve your own path, but the game has been nudging you all along. The Jedi's manipulation of Revan is a perfect metaphor for the player's relationship with the game itself. Are you really making these choices, or are you just playing along with what the developers designed? It's a twist that made Knights of the Old Republic legendary, not just as a Star Wars title, but as one of the greatest RPGs ever made. And for fans, the name Darth Revan has since become iconic. So much so that decades later, people are still begging Disney to bring him into canon. The Darth Revan reveal didn't just change the game, it changed how we think about protagonists in video games. And it set the stage for other developers to push the boundaries of what a player character could really be. But as shocking as it was to learn that you were Darth Revan, at least you still had a choice in the matter. Some games don't even give you that much. In one case, players discovered they had been manipulated from the very first button press. Few twists in gaming history have ever left players as rattled as the moment you realize in BioShock that you weren't really in control the entire time. For hours, you fought through the crumbling underwater city of Rapture, convinced that you were shaping your own destiny, making choices, and carving your own path through chaos. But then, with just 3 words, the illusion of free will shatters. Would you kindly? At first, it's harmless. Atlas, your Irish-accented guide through Rapture, peppers his instructions with the phrase constantly. Would you kindly get to higher ground? Would you kindly deal with that turret? It feels polite, almost endearing, like this stranger respects your role in this nightmare and is relying on you to help. In a game filled with splicers clawing at your face, mad scientists experimenting in shadows, and a city falling apart at the seams, having someone in your corner feels like a lifeline. And so, you follow Atlas. You believe he's on your side, a desperate survivor like you, working together to bring down the tyrant Andrew Ryan, the man who built Rapture, who preached freedom from government and religion, but who ended up ruling it with an iron grip. Every time Atlas speaks, you listen. Every time he says, "Would you kindly?" you obey. And why wouldn't you? He's been nothing but helpful. But that's the trap. Because when you finally confront Andrew Ryan, the mask slips. Ryan doesn't just reveal that Rapture is doomed or that Atlas isn't who he says he is. He looks you dead in the eyes and proves something far worse. You were never in control. Those 3 little words weren't a friendly catchphrase. They were a trigger, a hypnotic command buried in your very DNA. Every mission you completed, every step you took, wasn't your own decision. You were a puppet, and the player holding the controller wasn't the one pulling the strings. Andrew Ryan forces you to see the truth in the most brutal way possible. He doesn't fight you. He doesn't beg. He doesn't even try to survive. Instead, he repeats the phrase, "Would you kindly kill me?" And like a machine, your character obeys, bashing Ryan's skull in with a golf club while you, the real you, the player, sit horrified, forced to watch. It's one of the most shocking and uncomfortable sequences in video game history because it destroys the illusion that you ever had free will. And that's the genius of BioShock. It wasn't just a plot twist. It was a twist aimed directly at the player. Every time Atlas said, "Would you kindly?" you pressed the button. You did the thing. You followed orders without question. And in that moment, you realize you're not just role-playing a puppet in Rapture. You're being shown that video games themselves make you complicit in following orders. Go here, kill this, collect that. You never questioned it. The game was polite about it, but you were still doing exactly what it wanted. Atlas, of course, is no helpless survivor. He's Frank Fontaine, a con man manipulating you from the start. And suddenly, everything clicks into place. The missions that seemed random, the errands that felt like side quests, all carefully orchestrated steps designed to carry out Fontaine's plan. You weren't the hero of the story, you were his weapon. When BioShock launched in 2007, this twist hit players like a ton of bricks. Gamers were used to plot twists, sure, betrayals, surprise villains, shocking deaths, but this was different. This wasn't just about the characters in the story. This was about you. It pulled back the curtain on the very structure of video games and dared you to ask, are you ever really in control when you play? And here's where it gets even more brilliant. The twist doesn't end with Ryan's death. It sticks with you for the rest of the game. From that point forward, every action feels tainted. You can't help but second-guess every step. Am I doing this because I want to? or because someone wants me to think I want to. That paranoia follows you all the way through the final act, transforming BioShock from a stylish shooter into one of the most thought-provoking pieces of interactive storytelling ever made. The legacy of "Would You Kindly" is massive. It became a cultural shorthand for any twist that reveals the illusion of choice. Players reference it in discussions about game design, about storytelling, even about philosophy. Because what it really did was take the basic building block of video games, the idea that you, the player, have agency, and flip it upside down. And in a way, it was almost mocking us. We spend hours running down hallways, following quest markers, killing enemies because an NPC says so. And when Atlas says, "Would you kindly?" we do it without hesitation, just like we do in every other game. The only difference is that BioShock had the guts to point it out, rub our noses in it, and force us to feel the weight of being manipulated. For many players, that was the moment they realized that games could tell stories in ways that no movie, no book, no TV show ever could. Only in a video game can you be complicit in your own manipulation. Only in a video game can you be made to feel like a puppet, and then have the strings cut right in front of you. The "Would You Kindly" reveal didn't just make BioShock a classic, it made it a landmark in gaming history. And it set the stage for other developers to explore what it means to play, to obey, and to question the very systems that drive video games forward. But as haunting as it is to learn that you've been manipulated from the very beginning, there are games that go one step further. Games where it's not just about being controlled, but about realizing that your so-called heroic actions might actually be horrifying. Some games reveal you're the villain with a single jaw-dropping twist. Others take their time, drip-feeding you the truth until it finally sinks in. And then there's Spec Ops, The Line, a game that doesn't just reveal it, it makes you live it. On the surface, Spec Ops, The Line looked like another modern military shooter. Released in 2012, it was easy to dismiss as just another entry in a market flooded with games trying to mimic Call of Duty. But underneath the cover of dusty firefights and sandstorm-filled set pieces was one of the most psychologically devastating stories ever told in gaming. You play as Captain Martin Walker, sent into a sand-ravaged Dubai with your squad to locate survivors and track down a rogue U.S. Colonel, John Conrad. At first, it feels like a classic military rescue mission. You're the good guy, saving civilians, taking down enemies, doing what soldiers do best. It's straightforward, patriotic, and easy to slip into without thinking too hard. But that's exactly the point, because Spec Ops isn't about being a hero. It's about tearing that idea apart, piece by piece. The deeper you go into Dubai, the more the lines blur. Enemies don't look like villains, they look desperate. Civilians get caught in the crossfire. And then comes the moment that defines the entire game, the white phosphorus scene. You're ordered to take down a fortified enemy position. Standard military tactic. Use white phosphorus to clear it. It's presented as the only option. You either comply or you can't progress. So, like every obedient player, you do it. You rain down hellfire, watch the screen light up with fire and screams, and when the smoke clears, you realize what you've done. You didn't just destroy enemy soldiers. You incinerated dozens of civilians, men, women, and children, who were huddled for safety. And here's the brutal part. The game makes you walk through the aftermath. You don't just get a cutscene. You're forced to see the charred remains, the melted faces, the horror of what you've done. And Walker, your character, keeps telling himself it wasn't his fault. He had no choice. It was necessary. And as a player, you cling to that justification too, because what else can you do? Admit you pressed the button? That's the genius of Spec Ops. It implicates you. It makes you complicit. You can't hide behind the excuse of, "It's just a game," because the game makes it clear. You pulled the trigger, you followed the order, you kept pressing forward. The entire experience becomes a mirror held up to the player, asking, "Why are you here? Why are you enjoying this?" As Walker descends further into madness, so do you. Enemies become more savage, firefights more chaotic, and Walker's dialogue shifts from calm professionalism to paranoid rambling. You start seeing hallucinations, questioning what's real, and realizing that maybe Conrad isn't even alive anymore. Maybe this whole mission has been a delusion, a desperate attempt to justify the horrors you've committed. By the time the credits roll, there is no real victory. There's no neat resolution. The game forces you to sit with the fact that you weren't the savior of Dubai. You were its executioner. The people you were supposed to protect are dead because of your decisions. Your squad is broken, traumatized, or gone entirely. And Walker, the man you thought was a hero, is revealed to be the villain of his own story. The most disturbing part is how it reflects back on you, the player. Because let's be honest, you could have turned the game off. You didn't have to keep going, but you did. Because that's what we do in video games. We follow the mission, we press forward, we obey the objectives on the screen. And Spec Ops makes you question why. Are we so conditioned to seek fun through violence in games that will ignore the horror it represents? It's a rare example of a video game criticizing its own audience in real time. Most games reward you for killing enemies, for being efficient, for completing missions. Spec Ops punishes you for it. It dares you to look at what you've done and ask if it was worth it. When it released, Spec Ops, the line didn't sell like crazy. It wasn't a blockbuster hit. But over time, it's become a cult classic precisely because of its message. Players still talk about it today, not because of its gunplay or graphics, but because of the way it tore down the fantasy of being the untouchable hero. And maybe that's the real legacy of Spec Ops, the line. It proved that games don't always have to make you feel powerful. Sometimes, the most impactful experience is the one that makes you feel powerless. Or worse, the one that makes you realize you've been the villain the whole time. But as devastating as it is to realize you're the monster through your own actions, some games take a different approach. Instead of showing you the horrors you've caused, they peel back the curtain on your past and reveal that the darkness was inside you all along. Some villains wear capes, some wield armies, and some don't look like villains at all. At least, not until the truth claws its way to the surface. Few games have ever captured that as powerfully as Silent Hill 2. Released in 2001 for the PlayStation 2, this wasn't just another horror game. It wasn't about jump scares, zombie hordes, or cheap shocks. Silent Hill 2 was about something much darker: guilt, repression, and the twisted ways the human mind punishes itself. And at the heart of that story was James Sunderland, one of the most unassuming yet disturbing protagonists in video game history. It all starts with a letter. James receives a message from his wife, Mary. The problem? Mary's been dead for years, but the letter insists she's waiting for him in the town of Silent Hill. It's the kind of hook that drags players in immediately. Is she really alive? Was her death faked? Or is James losing his grip on reality? James heads to Silent Hill to search for answers, and what he finds isn't just a town shrouded in fog and monsters. It's a reflection of his own soul. That's the genius of Silent Hill. The monsters aren't random, they're manifestations. Every grotesque creature, every unsettling encounter, is a piece of James's subconscious-made flesh. Take Pyramid Head, for example. The towering executioner with a blade the size of a car door became an instant horror icon. But Pyramid Head isn't just a monster. It's James's guilt personified. It torments him, punishes him, forces him to confront the truth he's been burying. Other enemies, too. The twitching mannequins, the grotesque nurses. All symbolic echoes of James's inner torment. At first, players chalk it up to classic survival horror weirdness. But as the story unfolds, the real picture comes into focus. And it's far more horrifying than any monster could be. The truth is that James killed Mary. She wasn't taken from him by fate or illness. She was terminally ill, yes, but James, overwhelmed by grief, frustration, and perhaps even selfish desperation, ended her life himself. It wasn't an act of mercy so much as an escape. He couldn't bear the suffering, the burden, the weight of watching her fade away. So he smothered it, literally. Silent Hill, in turn, becomes his punishment. The foggy streets, the distorted enemies, even Pyramid Head, all manifestations of a psyche that refuses to let him forget. The entire game is James wandering through a hell of his own making, chasing after a wife he already knows is gone, while every corner of the town whispers, "You did this." When that realization finally lands for players, it's devastating. Because up until that point, James feels like a sympathetic figure, a grieving husband searching for closure. But suddenly, you're forced to see him for what he is, the architect of his wife's death. And worse, you've been helping him chase down a lie, unknowingly enabling his denial. What makes this so powerful is how Silent Hill 2 weaponizes atmosphere and ambiguity. The game never shoves the truth in your face with a neat exposition dump. Instead, it lets the horror build, lets the symbolism gnaw at you, until finally, the puzzle pieces snap together. And when they do, you're not just horrified by James, you're horrified by yourself for having inhabited him for the entire journey. The multiple endings reinforce this unease. Depending on how you play, James can either embrace his guilt and end his own life, leave Silent Hill with a chance at redemption, or, in some of the darker endings, double down on denial, taking on new twisted paths. Each ending feels less like winning and more like judgment, a reflection of how much James has confronted, or failed to confront, his inner darkness. And that's what cements Silent Hill 2 as one of the most haunting games ever made. It doesn't rely on gore or shock value. It uses the weight of guilt as the true villain. The monsters are terrifying, yes, but they're not the real threat. The real terror is the realization that James himself is the monster, that everything you've been fighting through is just his psyche, peeling back layer by layer until you see the rot underneath. For players in 2001, this was revolutionary. Most horror games before it treated protagonists as blank slates, simple survivors reacting to outside threats. Silent Hill 2 flipped that on its head, turning the player into both the victim and the villain. And in doing so, it told a story that still resonates decades later. Even today, fans debate the details. Was James acting out of mercy? Was it rage? Was he justified? Or is that just another excuse? But maybe that's the point. Silent Hill 2 doesn't give you easy answers because guilt itself doesn't offer easy answers. It festers, it twists, it haunts you. And in James's case, it literally reshaped the world around him into a nightmare he couldn't escape. When we talk about games where you realize you're the villain, this one stands apart. It's not about world domination, it's not about hidden identities, and it's not about mind control. It's about something far more human, the crushing weight of guilt and the way it turns us into monsters in our own stories. But Silent Hill wasn't the only game to pull the rug out by revealing that the hero was never what they seemed. Sometimes the betrayal doesn't come from inside your own heart. It comes from a character you've been guiding and trusting the entire game. By 2010, video games were starting to push boundaries in storytelling like never before. Heavy Rain from Quantic Dream was marketed not as a typical action game, but as an interactive drama. It wasn't about high scores or kill counts. It was about choices, consequences, and a tense mystery. And for hours, players thought they were in the driver's seat of a noir-style investigation, closing in on a shadowy serial killer. But then came the reveal that left jaws on the floor. The Origami killer wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was right there with you the whole time. The setup is simple, almost cinematic. A mysterious figure known as the Origami killer has been abducting young boys, leaving them to drown in rainwater, with a folded paper figure at each crime scene. As the player, you don't just control one character, You step into the shoes of multiple protagonists, each with their own perspective. There's Ethan Mars, a grieving father desperate to save his kidnapped son. Madison Page, a journalist caught up in the chaos. Norman Jayden, an FBI agent investigating the crimes. And Scott Shelby, a private investigator seemingly helping the victims' families track down the truth. This multi-perspective approach was groundbreaking at the time. It let you see the case from different angles, kept the suspense high, and, most importantly, kept you from realizing what was really happening. Because while you thought Scott Shelby was your ally, digging up leads and protecting the innocent, the reality was far darker. Scott Shelby was the Origami killer all along. The brilliance of this twist comes from how carefully it's hidden. As Shelby, you spend much of the game doing what feels like noble detective work, interviewing witnesses, comforting grieving parents, even getting into scuffles with criminals to protect information. You feel like a grizzled ex-cop who's out to find justice where the police failed. And because you're controlling him, the player buys into it without question. Why would the game let you be the killer? That's exactly the sleight of hand. Shelby isn't investigating the murders to catch the killer. He's tying up loose ends, covering his own tracks, and making sure nobody gets too close to the truth. Every helpful gesture, every lead followed, is really just misdirection. And when the mask finally drops, players are left reeling, not just because of who Shelby is, but because of how complicit they feel in helping him. Think about it. You walked him into those homes. You sat with victims' families, you earned their trust, and all the while you were the monster they were searching for. That's the sting. The game makes you empathize with the killer, even become him, long before it tells you who he is. Now, was it flawless? Not entirely. Some players argued that Heavy Rain cheated by hiding key details from you during Shelby's sections. For instance, there are moments where the game shows him reacting in ways that don't line up with him being the killer. It deliberately misleads the player. But whether you saw it as clever writing or narrative trickery, the twist still landed with impact. And it worked because Heavy Rain wasn't really about the identity of the killer. It was about the psychology of choice. The game constantly put you in situations where you had to decide how far you'd go to save a life. Would you hurt someone? Would you cut yourself? Would you even kill? These moral dilemmas were the glue that held the story together, and finding out that one of the characters you trusted was orchestrating the entire nightmare just twisted that knife even deeper. The reveal also reframed Shelby's character completely. What once felt like a weary but noble man became a chilling portrait of obsession. His killings weren't random. They were rooted in his own twisted backstory, tied to childhood trauma and resentment. In his mind, it was almost justified. To the player, it was horrifying. And in a way, the twist made Heavy Rain unforgettable. Love it or hate it, everyone remembered the moment they realized the Origami killer was the man they'd been guiding for hours. It wasn't just a story beat, it was a betrayal of trust between player and character, and between player and game. That's the power of putting players in multiple roles. You never expect one of them to be the villain. You expect to chase the monster, not hold the controller while he sharpens the knife. And Heavy Rain forced you to sit with that uncomfortable truth. It also sparked a trend. In the years that followed, more narrative-driven games started experimenting with unreliable protagonists, hidden agendas, and perspective shifts that made players second-guess what they knew. And while Quantic Dream has had its critics, Heavy Rain remains a landmark moment for proving just how deeply a twist can cut when it makes the player feel personally responsible. But as shocking as it is to realize the friendly detective you've been controlling is the killer, some games go for something even more primal. Not revealing the truth about your identity, but about the darkness you're slowly surrendering to. Some villains are born, some are unmasked, and some are created slowly, as the weight of rage and the lure of power consume them. That's the story of Jackie Estacado in the Darkness, a game that doesn't just hand you supernatural abilities, but dares you to notice how those abilities start eating away at the very idea of who you are. Released in 2007 for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, The Darkness was based on a cult favorite comic series, but the game took its own spin on the mythology. At its core, it's a crime story. Jackie is a young hitman working for the Franchetti crime family in New York City. On his 21st birthday, he's marked for death by his own uncle, Paulie Franchetti, who sees him as a threat, a betrayal, a setup, a manhunt through the streets. It's a gritty mob story straight out of Goodfellas or The Sopranos. But then comes the twist. Jackie doesn't just fight back with guns and grit. On that same night, something ancient awakens inside him, an entity simply known as the Darkness. It's a primal, otherworldly force that gives Jackie terrifying powers. Summoning demon arms to tear through enemies, devouring hearts to grow stronger, summoning darklings to maim and terrorize. The catch? It only works in the shadows. Step into the light, and Jackie is just another man. But in the dark, he becomes something else. At first, it feels like justice. Jackie's been betrayed, hunted, stripped of his life by the people he trusted. So when the Darkness offers him the tools to fight back, who wouldn't accept? You use its powers to carve through Paulie's men, to push deeper into the underworld of betrayal, to get revenge. And let's be honest, the powers are intoxicating. Pulling enemies apart with tendrils, watching gangsters cower in fear, unleashing chaos. It feels good. Too good. And that's where the danger lies. Because as Jackie wields the Darkness, it starts to become clear. He's not in control. The more he uses it, the more it whispers, the more it feeds, the more it blurs the line between Jackie the man and Jackie the monster. What begins as a story of survival and revenge slowly curdles into something much darker, an exploration of how easy it is to lose yourself when power becomes your crutch. The most gut-wrenching part comes when vengeance stops being noble and starts being destructive. Jackie's pursuit of revenge leads to collateral damage, not just in faceless enemies, but in the people he loves. His girlfriend Jenny becomes caught in the storm. In one of the most infamous scenes, Jackie is forced to watch helplessly as Jenny is murdered by Paulie, all while the Darkness holds him back, savoring his despair. It's a moment that flips the entire narrative. You realize the Darkness doesn't just live inside Jackie. It thrives on his pain. It wanted him broken. It wanted him to lash out, to keep feeding it. From there, Jackie's path spirals. Revenge becomes obsession. Every kill feels less like retribution and more like indulgence. And by the end, the question isn't whether Paulie Franchetti deserves to die. It's whether Jackie has any humanity left to reclaim. The player isn't just guiding him toward revenge anymore. You're guiding him toward damnation. That's what makes the Darkness so effective as a villain reveal story. Jackie doesn't wake up one day and discover he's secretly the bad guy. He becomes the bad guy right in front of you, bit by bit, as you press the buttons, summon the tendrils, and let the Darkness wrap tighter around his soul. It's a slow burn tragedy, and you, the player, are complicit in every step. And here's where it gets even more clever. The game doesn't let you forget what you've lost. Between the bloodshed and carnage, Jackie sometimes finds himself in dreamlike sequences with Jenny, sitting together on a couch watching TV. These quiet moments are heartbreaking because they remind you who Jackie could have been without the Darkness. Just a man in love, trying to find a little peace in a violent world. But every time you return to reality, the blood on your hands is a little heavier, the voice in your head a little louder. By the finale, Jackie has his revenge. Paulie is dead, the betrayal avenged, the score settled. But it doesn't feel like victory. It feels hollow, corrupted, poisoned by the cost. Because what Jackie really did was hand himself over to the Darkness, letting it define him. The mob war might be over, but the war inside Jackie has only just begun. And it's one he's losing. That's why the darkness belongs on this list. It's not about one shocking revelation. It's about the realization that sometimes the villain isn't revealed with a twist. Sometimes the villain is revealed slowly, painfully, as you watch the person you're playing give in to power they can't control. Jackie starts as a victim of betrayal, but by the end, you can't help but wonder, is he any better than the men he was fighting? Or has he become something even worse? It's a theme that resonates because it taps into something universal, the idea that power corrupts. And in Jackie's case, it corrupts completely. But Jackie isn't the only hero tempted to trade love and family for power. Another game, released just a few years earlier, gave players a choice so chilling it could literally turn them into the villain with one button press. When Fable launched in 2004, it promised players something revolutionary, a living, breathing fantasy world where your choices mattered. You could be a noble savior, a selfish rogue, or a downright tyrant. The game tracked your morality not just with dialogue choices, but with how the world itself reacted to you. Villagers would cheer your name if you were righteous, or cower in fear if you embraced cruelty. For players at the time, it felt like true freedom. But hidden in that freedom was one of the darkest temptations in gaming. Because at the height of your adventure, after defeating the legendary villain Jack of Blades, the game presents you with a choice that could forever define your legacy. Jack of Blades is no ordinary foe. He's the boogeyman of Albion, a mythical tyrant who has plagued the land for generations, whispering through masks and legends. When you finally face him, it's the culmination of everything you've trained for, swinging swords, casting spells, forging your destiny. And when you bring him down, the world breathes a sigh of relief. The nightmare is over, or so it seems. That's when the Sword of Aeons enters the picture, a blade of unimaginable power, pulsing with the essence of those who wielded it. With Jack defeated, the weapon is yours for the taking. But there's a catch, a brutal personal one. To claim the sword's true power, you must kill your own sister, Teresa. It's the ultimate test of character. Do you choose family, rejecting the temptation and destroying the sword forever? Or do you let greed win, striking down the one person who stood by you since childhood, all for the sake of raw power? What made this moment so shocking wasn't just the choice itself, but the fact that Fable had been building toward it all along. The game's morality system let you flirt with darkness, stealing, cheating, betraying. But this wasn't petty mischief. This was a point of no return. It was the game looking you in the eye and asking, have you really been the hero you thought you were? Or has all this talk of destiny just been a mask for your hunger for power? And the consequences were immediate. If you chose power, the Sword of Aeons became yours, a weapon of terrifying strength, a symbol of your villainy. But you also became forever marked, a dark legend in Albion's history. Villagers didn't cheer anymore. They whispered, they feared. You weren't just the hero who saved the land. You were the monster who sacrificed blood for power. For many players, this was their first real taste of what it felt like to become the villain by choice. RPGs before Fable had given you moral decisions, sure, but never one so intimate, so personal, so tied to family. And it worked because it hit you where it hurt. Teresa wasn't just another NPC. She was your sister, a piece of your character's story from the very beginning. Killing her wasn't just a gameplay choice. It was a betrayal of blood, a step into darkness you couldn't take back. Of course, you could resist. You could refuse the temptation, shatter the sword, and prove that your heart was stronger than any weapon. But that's what made the moment so memorable. It wasn't about right or wrong. It was about who you really were when faced with the ultimate temptation. And let's be honest, plenty of players tried both. Some took the noble path on their first run, saving their sister. Others gave into curiosity, wondering what would happen if they swung the blade. And when they did, they realized they weren't just role-playing evil. They were embracing it, letting the game transform them into something far darker than they expected. What's fascinating is how Fable leaned into this idea of temptation throughout the series. Later entries would expand on moral choices, but it was this first one, this simple, devastating decision, that cemented the franchise as one of the pioneers of morality-driven gameplay. It showed how one button press could redefine not just your character, but how the entire game world saw you. Looking back, it's easy to see how the Sword of Aeon's choice became legendary. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't some giant plot twist. It was something quieter, more insidious. The realization that the line between hero and villain is often just a single choice. And the worst part? The game made it tempting. Because who wouldn't want the strongest sword in Albion? Who wouldn't want to feel unstoppable, even if it cost them their humanity? That's the beauty of Fable's design. It didn't just punish you for being bad. It tempted you to want it. It dangled power in front of you and whispered, all it takes is one swing. And many players took it. In the end, Fable's big reveal wasn't about identity or manipulation. It was about how easy it is to fall when power is offered on a silver platter. It made you confront not just what your character would do, but what you would do. And that's why it belongs right alongside the greatest villain turns in gaming. But while Fable made you weigh power against family, some games strip the choice away entirely. They hand you a dark legacy and reveal that no matter how hard you fight, the villain was always in your blood. Not every villain reveal comes with explosions, epic battles, or dramatic speeches. Sometimes, the most terrifying truth is the quiet one. The realization that the evil you've been hunting was never out there at all. It was you. That's the story behind The Black Mirror, a 2003 point-and-click adventure game that blended gothic horror with a slow-burn detective story. And while it didn't have the mainstream splash of games like BioShock or KOTOR, it carved out a place in gaming history as one of the most haunting examples of inherited villainy. You play as Samuel Gordon, a man returning to his family's ancestral estate in rural England after the mysterious death of his grandfather, William. The setting is classic Gothic horror: sprawling castles, shadowy forests, stormy nights. The Gordon family has always been shrouded in whispers of curses and tragedies, and William's death seems to confirm that something is still very wrong with this bloodline. At first, Samuel feels like the reluctant protagonist. He doesn't want to be back at Black Mirror Manor. He doesn't want to be dragged into his family's twisted legacy. But as the story unfolds, you're drawn deeper into the mystery, investigating strange deaths, unraveling occult secrets, and piecing together the puzzle of the Gordon family curse. On the surface, it plays like a detective story. You're gathering clues, questioning suspects, trying to uncover who or what is behind the wave of murders plaguing the family. Every clue points to something supernatural: ancient rituals, dark symbols, whispers of demonic pacts stretching back generations. The tension builds, and as a player, you're convinced you're chasing down some outside force, some hidden killer lurking in the shadows of the estate. But then the mask comes off. The deeper Samuel digs, the more he realizes the truth. It isn't some shadowy figure committing these murders. It isn't a monster stalking the halls of Black Mirror Manor. It's him. Samuel Gordon himself is the murderer, acting under the influence of the very curse he was investigating. The family evil isn't just a legend, it's real, and it flows in his veins. That's the devastating moment, because as players, we trust Samuel. We think we're guiding a tortured but noble soul through a horror story, helping him resist the darkness. But in reality, every clue we've uncovered, every thread we followed, has just been Samuel circling closer and closer to his own guilt. The brilliance of this twist lies in how it reframes everything that came before. All those moments where Samuel seemed haunted, all the strange blackouts, all the times other characters looked at him with unease. It all suddenly makes sense. You weren't the detective chasing a killer. You were the killer, trying desperately to bury the truth under layers of denial. And unlike other games where becoming the villain is a choice, the Black Mirror doesn't give you one. There's no paragon or renegade path here, no chance to resist the darkness. It's inevitable. You can't rewrite your bloodline. You can't escape your heritage. The Gordon curse has claimed every generation before you, and now it's claimed you. That's what makes this twist so haunting. It taps into a primal fear, not of monsters, but of fate. The idea that no matter how much you struggle, no matter how many good deeds you try to do, you can't outrun what's inside you. Samuel never had a chance. And by playing as him, neither did you. The ending is as bleak as it is unforgettable. With the truth revealed, Samuel's descent into madness is complete. The hero you thought you were guiding through a haunted house mystery is gone, consumed by the same darkness that destroyed his family. It's a tragedy, a curse realized, and a gut-punch reminder that not every story ends with redemption. While The Black Mirror never reached the commercial heights of bigger franchises, it became a cult classic because of this reveal. Fans of gothic horror still point to it as one of the best narrative payoffs in adventure gaming. And it proved that you don't need bombastic action to deliver a devastating twist. Sometimes, the quiet realization that you've been the villain all along is enough to chill you to the bone. What makes it even more fascinating is how The Black Mirror anticipated a wave of similar games that would explore unreliable protagonists, fractured psyches, and inherited guilt. You can see echoes of its storytelling DNA in titles like Amnesia, The Dark Descent, and even modern indie horror games. It planted the seed that sometimes the scariest revelation in horror isn't about what you're fighting. It's about who you really are. And that's why this game deserves its place on the list. It's not about power like Fable or corruption like the darkness. It's about inevitability, about the horror of realizing that your bloodline, your fate, your very identity has already doomed you. Samuel Gordon never stood a chance. And when the credits rolled, neither did you. But while The Black Mirror leaves you with the dread of inevitability, our next game flips the script, where you, as the hero, might not inherit evil, but actually help create it. And the villain you create, he just so happens to be one of the most iconic in all of comic book history. When we talk about iconic villains, few names land harder than the Joker. For over 80 years, he's been Batman's ultimate nemesis, a chaotic, laughing embodiment of madness and cruelty. Normally, when we see him in movies, comics, or games, the Joker arrives fully formed, already insane, already dangerous, already locked in his eternal duel with the Dark Knight. But Batman, the enemy within, did something no Batman story had really done before. It asked, what if the Joker wasn't inevitable? What if his birth as a villain came down to you, the player? This Telltale game, released in 2017, was the second season of their Batman series, and it flipped the script on the character of John Doe, a pale, unsettling man introduced in the first season. When players first meet him, he's not the Joker yet. He's just John, eccentric, unpredictable, but oddly vulnerable. He's fascinated with Bruce Wayne, desperate for friendship, and constantly teetering between loyalty and instability. He's like wet clay, waiting to be shaped. And here's the kicker. You are the sculptor. Throughout The Enemy Within, every choice you make around John determines what kind of Joker he'll become. Treat him with kindness, offer trust, and show him compassion. And John starts leaning toward becoming a vigilante, a warped, chaotic version of a hero who still wants to do good in his own unhinged way. Treat him harshly, betray his trust, or push him away, and the scales tip the other direction. John becomes the Joker we all know, sadistic, vengeful, a clown-faced terror who channels his heartbreak into destruction. It's a genius twist because, for the first time, the Joker isn't just born crazy. He's born out of the relationship between Bruce Wayne and John Doe. He's a villain you help create. And that realization hits hard when you look back and realize that every seemingly small choice, the tone of your words, whether you extended trust, whether you treated him like a person or a monster, was a nudge that pushed him closer to his destiny. What makes this even more powerful is the way the game constantly plays with your expectations. Every Batman fan knows who the Joker is supposed to become. So when John first appears, you're immediately on edge, waiting for the laughter, the green hair, the crime sprees. But Telltale twists the knife by making John almost sympathetic. He's awkward. He's desperate for belonging. He just wants someone to see him, to believe in him. And for a moment, you actually wonder, could this man really be saved? That's where the player's role becomes so critical, because you know the history. You know the Joker is supposed to be Batman's nemesis. But when John looks at Bruce with wide, trusting eyes, when he calls you his best friend, it becomes harder to push him away. The tension isn't just in the story, it's in your own hands. Do you play along, trying to change his fate? Or do you push him toward what you know is coming? And unlike other games where the villain reveal is set in stone, here the reveal is your fault. If John becomes the Joker, it's because of how you treated him. If he leans toward vigilante justice, it's because you gave him hope. Either way, the story makes you question the ripple effect of your actions. Did you really help him, or did you just delay the inevitable? That's the brilliance of Telltale's storytelling. They took a villain whose origin had always felt untouchable and made it personal. Instead of saying, "This is how the Joker came to be," they said, "You decide how the Joker comes to be." It made players feel both empowered and horrified. Empowered because they had agency over one of the most iconic arcs in comics, and horrified because of the weight of that responsibility. And let's be clear, no matter which path John takes, the outcome is unsettling. If he becomes a vigilante, he's unstable, violent, and dangerously unpredictable. Less a hero, more a ticking time bomb. If he becomes the Joker, well, you already know how that ends. Blood, chaos, and a never-ending war with Batman. Either way, you're left asking, did I really save him? Or did I just create a different kind of monster? That's why the enemy within stands out in this list. Other games reveal that you were the villain all along. This one reveals that the villain standing across from you is your responsibility. That his madness, his violence, his warped sense of justice are all consequences of your influence. It takes the Joker, a character who has always felt larger than life, and makes him heartbreakingly human, vulnerable, someone who could have been different, if only the world or Bruce Wayne had treated him differently. For longtime Batman fans, that was earth-shattering. It reframed one of the greatest rivalries in fiction and made you question whether Batman himself wasn't just as responsible for the Joker's creation as fate or tragedy. After all, if your choices as Bruce Wayne could nudge John toward darkness, doesn't that mean Batman was always complicit in his villain's birth? And maybe that's what made this story so haunting. Because for the first time, the Joker wasn't inevitable. He wasn't fate. He wasn't destiny. He was choice. He was your choice. But while the enemy within gave players the power to create a villain, our final story flips things one last time. This isn't about shaping someone else, or realizing you were manipulated, or being consumed by guilt. This is about learning that the hero you've been controlling was never human at all. By the late 2000s, open-world games were obsessed with power fantasies. You could climb skyscrapers, hurl cars, leap across rooftops, and carve through enemies with godlike abilities. Prototype, released in 2009, fit perfectly into that mold on the surface. It was brutal, flashy, and exhilarating. A playground of destruction where you played as Alex Mercer, a man who wakes up in a morgue with no memory, only to discover he has terrifying shape-shifting powers. From the start, Prototype felt like wish fulfillment turned up to 11. Alex could leap across entire city blocks, sprint up the sides of buildings, sprout claws the size of swords, and tear tanks apart with his bare hands. He could consume enemies, absorbing their memories, skills, and even their faces. One minute you're dodging missiles, the next, you're disguising yourself as the soldier who fired them. It was chaotic, it was cathartic, and it felt like nothing could stop you. But there was always a nagging question. What exactly are you? The game teased you with flashes of Alex's past. Before his death, he'd been a scientist at Gentek, a shady biotech corporation. He'd uncovered secrets about a deadly virus known as Blacklight, stolen a sample, and tried to escape, only to be gunned down. And yet, here he was, alive again, wielding powers no human should possess. Was he some kind of failed experiment? A miracle survivor? Or something darker? As players ripped through the streets of Manhattan, that mystery loomed in the background. You told yourself you were the anti-hero. Yes, you left destruction in your wake, but you were fighting for answers. You wanted to know who you were, what Gentek had done to you, and maybe, just maybe, you wanted revenge. The game dangled that thread just long enough for you to believe Alex Mercer was, at his core, still human. Then the truth dropped. And it wasn't just shocking, it was devastating. Alex Mercer didn't survive the shooting at all. The man you thought you were playing, he died in that morgue. What crawled out wasn't Alex, it was the virus. The blacklight infection itself had consumed his corpse, copied his memories, and walked away wearing his skin. You weren't Alex Mercer seeking justice. You were the monster that killed him. It's a twist that completely flips the narrative. All that destruction you caused, all those missions you justified as payback or survival, they weren't the acts of a man clinging to humanity. They were the acts of a virus spreading, evolving, consuming everything in its path. Alex Mercer wasn't a tragic anti-hero. He was ground zero. And the brilliance of the reveal is how it reframes every power you've been enjoying. The claws, the tendrils, the ability to devour others. It all suddenly feels less like superpowers and more like a parasite at work. You're not saving New York, you're infecting it. Every ability you use is a reminder that you're not a man with powers. You're a plague, wearing a man's memories like a mask. What makes it sting even more is the way the game forces you to confront the moral ambiguity of it all. You might tell yourself you're fighting to stop the military, or Gentek, or the monsters roaming the city. But at the end of the day, you're just another monster, maybe the worst one of all, and players felt that weight. Sure, you could keep cutting down soldiers and hijacking helicopters, but that nagging truth followed you. Every innocent person crushed under your rampages, every civilian you consumed for health, every skyscraper you shattered. It was all just the virus doing what it was made to do. Survive, spread, destroy. By the time the credits rolled, Prototype left you with a question most power fantasies never dared to ask. If you strip away the justifications, if you peel back the illusions of being the protagonist, are you really a hero? Or are you just another villain? One whose scale of destruction dwarfs every enemy you fought. For many players, that was what made Prototype unforgettable. It wasn't just the carnage, the freedom, or the flashy combat. It was that gut punch of realizing you weren't who you thought you were, that the very skin you inhabited was a lie. And unlike games where you might still cling to redemption, Prototype didn't give you that option. You couldn't stop being the virus. You couldn't choose to go good. You were the monster. Always had been. It was a bold twist, one that turned the traditional superhero fantasy inside out. Instead of rising above your powers, you were consumed by them. Instead of saving the city, you were the very reason it was burning. And that's what puts Alex Mercer alongside characters like Darth Revan or James Sunderland, protagonists who, in the end, force players to realize the scariest villain in the game wasn't across the battlefield. It was the one you'd been controlling all along,